Here I am in the blank student scores summary sheet. The only things I have to fill out are the green and the blue. First, I'm going to begin entering some student scores from my recent test. So here's Hannah's score, here's Betsy's score, and you can see that the chart starts to fill in on the right. As I add scores, it is calculating the letter grade, and it's tallying up how many people got a C, how many people got an F, and then it puts those tallies into this graph. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump to the end. Here are the rest of my student scores, and there's what the graph looks like. I can see that 6% scored some form of an A, 39% scored some form of a C, and all of that data is also shown in the graph. Now maybe I decide that my class average is 75.6. Perhaps that's a little too low, okay? What I could do is apply a curve. The way this curve works, we decide what this 92 turns into. We decide what the 55 turns into. This is the maximum score. This is the upper bound. This is the lower boundary. And it calculates, it auto-calculates every student score in between the max and min. So maybe I want my highest score to go from a 92 to a 96. And perhaps I want my lowest student score to go from a 55 up to a 68. And now I can see the curved scores that each student has earned, right? Susie went from a 70 up to a 79, and I see that's a 10% increase. I also have the new letter grades that students earned based on the curve, and the data from above, the tallying data, is also shown for the curved scores. So I have graphs for both. Now, I can also check out my class average went from a 76 up to an 84. On average, that's an 8% increase. And if I change these values, I could tweak these numbers and say, okay, well, what if this is a 64 and this is a 95 or 94? And I can look at the graphs, I can look at the summaries, the data tallies, and I can make decisions, based on what's happening. Now, it might seem unfair. I mean, students might say, Wendy only went up 3 percentage points, whereas Grace, her score increased 9 percentage points. How could that be fair, students may ask. There is a reason for using this type of a system. Imagine your test was really, really hard, right? If that's the case, this type of a curve could make sense. Let me show you why. Sue was a strong student. She got a 93% overall. Vicky was a weaker student, 27%. If we gave Sue an easier test, well, her score on questions 2 and 3, if she got a 5 out of 5 on the hard question, she's going to get a 5 out of 5 on the easy question. The 4 out of 5, she could only improve to a 5 out of 5, right? So now her total score is 100%. Vicky, by contrast, had much more room to have improved. Her 1 out of 5, that might have gone up to a 3. The 2 out of 5 perhaps rose to a 4 when she saw an easier test. And this 1 out of 5 perhaps goes up to a 2 out of 5. So if we tally, this is 7, that's 9 out of 15, is 60%. And look at what has happened. Sue only went up 7 percentage points, whereas Vicky, the weaker student, went up 33 percentage points. This is the rationale behind the curve I showed just before. If the test was really hard, if you think the questions were bona fide hard questions, just difficult, then it would make sense to give more bump, more grade increase to the weaker students and less grade increase to the stronger students. So how do you know if your test was hard? Well, I tend to reflect on the questions themselves, and I ask things like, were they highly unfamiliar? Were they highly complex? Were they scenarios that we didn't really practice as a class? And then most importantly, if I imagine rewriting the test easier, are there easier questions that I could put onto this hypothetical easier test? What would those questions look like? Okay. So for example, imagine test 1 is this, 3 questions. There are no easier questions, you know? Here's the more complex version. If you give this test, but you still get results like this, how could you possibly make these questions easier? They're already so much, so far below this higher level that maybe you practiced with your students. So if this is what the test looked like, then there is no possible way to change the questions so that Vicky raises to this level. There's simply easier questions don't exist that you might have put. If Vicky did poorly on these, she would have done poorly on any other questions you might have put into the test. So that's the kind of thing that I think about. It's not, these are subjective terms, hard and easy. Familiar, complex, practiced, these are all terms that are subjective. So it's something where I reflect on how my students were doing in the unit, what level were they at, things like that. This is what I consider when I'm trying to discern whether it was actually a hard test. Okay, thanks for watching.